Hey everyone, and welcome to this video in which we're going to learn how to use the OpenAI API, or in other words, the thing that powers ChatGPT, to build our own ChatGPT clone. And we're going to be doing this in React for the front end with a Node.js backend. So that's what we're going to be doing today. The final product will look like this, and it will allow us to write text prompts. And once we do that, we'll start a new chat automatically, and then we can carry on having a chat with the AI. Now, if we want to create a new chat, all we do is click on the button and that will generate a new chat for us. And automatically that first text prompt will be saved to the history. And the best part about it is that we can go back to the previous chat and add to it again, go to the next one, add to that, and that will be tracked accordingly. And of course, we can create new chats as well. So that is a cool feature that I'm going to show you how to do. And we're going to be saving that to state. Of course, we will also be keeping our API keys safe, and we're going to try do it with not using all our free tokens, okay? So I am super excited about this. What are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Okay, so first off, I'm just going to create a new project. I'm using WebStorm, so all I have to do is click here and I can select React, and then I can call this whatever I want. So I'm going to call this React ChatGPT clone. Okay, and that will get made in my WebStorm project, and it's going to use this command, so npx, and then the string create React app as one, so that is separated by a space here, and I'm just going to click create. Now, for those of you who aren't using WebStorm, all you would do is use your terminal. So here is my terminal. I'm just going to make it bigger, and then you can gravitate to wherever you want. So I'm going to go into WebStorm projects, and then you would use npx create React app, and then whatever you want to call your project. So React Chat GPT clone, and hit enter. Okay, so that is what you would do. Of course, I'm not going to do it this way because I'm using WebStorm, which has done all that for me. So this is essentially spinning up all the files and configuration that I need for this project. So we're just going to wait for that to do its thing. So when that is ready, it should say happy hacking. And there we go, happy hacking. As you see, all the folders and correct files are already in there for me. So let's just clean this up a little bit. We're not going to write any tests. So I'm just going to delete these two. I'm going to delete that. We also don't need a logo, so let's go ahead and delete the logo. I'm also going to delete the app test file because we're not writing any tests, as well as this CSS file because I'm just going to put all my CSS in one file because it's a small project. So that's it. So at the moment, you should just have these three files in the source directory. The app.js file looks like this, and I'm just going to delete everything in here so that we can start fresh. That is what it should look like. I'm also going to change this to a functional expression just because that is my preference, and we don't need these two imports. So this is what your app.js file should look like. Your CSS file should just be empty so we can start fresh. And your index.js, well, we're not writing any tests, so let's delete that. We don't need this. I'm going to delete the semicolons. Again, that is a personal preference. And we are ready to roll. So that is my index.js file, that is my index.css file, and that is my app.js file, and that's all that we should have in here. Great. So again, like I said, this is a really small project, so we're actually not going to have any components or anything like that because this is about learning how to use the OpenAI API. So I'm just going to start building up my app. So I'm going to start up by having two sections. So one section that's going to be for the sidebar, and one section is going to be for the, I guess, main part of the app. So let's give this the class name of sidebar, and this the class name of main, so we can differentiate between the two. Main. So what do we want to go in our sidebar? Well, I want to have a button. This is going to create a new chat, and I'm going to just put a little plus text icon here. If you want to know where I got the text icon from, I'm just going to search for it. You can simply just get it by searching for it. So if you visit this URL, you'll be able to get that plus sign as well. So I believe so. Anyway, let's just find, yeah, so there it is. Great. So that is my text icon. Next up, after the button, I'm going to actually have an unordered list. And this is going to be for the history of all our previous prompts. So I'm just going to pick it out by the class name of history as well, just to kind of make things more readable. And in here, we're actually going to map out onto list items the first prompt that we wrote for the chat, the first text prompt. So we'll leave that for now. And lastly, I'm going to have a nav element. And in here, I'm just going to have the P element of made by Anya. So that is my whole section, my first section. It's got 3 children, which I want to space out evenly. So I'm going to use justify content space between to space them out evenly. So shall we do that? Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so let's get my index CSS file up. I'm going to say that everything, so star means everything in this, I guess, project is going to have the font color of white and the font family of Open Sans. So Open Sans is something that I'm going to get from Google Fonts. So please go ahead and just get it as well. So just go to Google Fonts, and then all you're going to do is search for Open Sans. There it is. And then I'm going to select the appropriate ones. I'm going to actually select all the weights so that we have all of them to our disposal. So I think that's it. I'm not getting the italic ones. So if you click here, we can then import them. You can import them into the HTML or the CSS. I'm going to import them into the CSS. I'm going to grab that. And what I'm going to do is just paste it, making sure that there's semicolons at the end. And you can see all the font weights that we have to our disposal. So now if I want to use this, here's the rule that I need to use. We can have anything as a backup, but I'm happy having sans serif as a backup as they have kind of given us. So there we go. So yeah, everything in here is going to have essentially white text that is Open Sans, and if Open Sans doesn't work, it will revert to sans serif as the backup. Next, I'm going to grab the whole body, and I'm just going to get rid of any default margin and padding. So margin and padding, I'm just going to set as 0 to get rid of any weird, funky white borders that we may have. And now, let's make this bigger. I'm going to grab, so the wrapping element, so the element with the class name of app. So let's grab it by the class name. And I'm just going to give the whole app a background color. So the background color I have picked out already directly from ChatGPT, and it is this 343541. Okay, and I'm just going to make sure that the sidebar, so let's style the sidebar, but also main, let's give them both some styling first. So the sidebar, I want the background color of this to be darker. Again, I have picked this out as 202.123. And I'm actually going to make sure that the height is 100 of the viewport height, but the width is only 244 pixels, and it's going to be stuck at 244 pixels. Okay, and while we're here, I'm also just going to make sure, well, let's just leave it at that for now. And the main, I'm also going to give it a height of 100 of the viewport height, but width, I'm just going to say 100%. So it's going to try to take up 100%, but obviously we've got the sidebar there. At the moment though, let's go ahead and start this project. So in WebStorm, I can just hit here and it will run the command npm start. So essentially look in here and run this command. But if you are not using WebStorm, I'm just going to show you how to do it. You would find the project first, so WebStorm projects, and this is, what do we call this? React ChatGPT clone. You would do npm run start and hit enter. Okay, because you're literally just doing npm run and whatever we've called this, and we call this start so that it runs this. So let's go ahead and do that on WebStorm. So I'm just going to click here and then it should start up. Boom. So great. This is looking very cool. I'm just going to inspect it for now. So I want essentially this to be, you know, just spaced out evenly, right? I want it to appear, this to be at the bottom, and then history, which at the moment doesn't have much styling, to be in the middle, and the new chat button to be at the top. I can use so with display flex. So let's minimize this. I'm going to minimize that too. And on the sidebar, I'm going to initialize flexbox. So that is initialized so I can use it. And we now want everything to be stacked on top of each other, because if I save this, it will, stack next to each other. We don't want that. We want it to be over each other. So flex direction column. And now I'm going to do justify content space between. So now they are spaced out. And if I kind of move this, they'll always be at the bottom. The space between all the 3 children should be equal. So in here, the 3 children, there's 1 child, there's the 2nd child, and the 3rd child have equal spacing between them. Let's carry on. Maybe let's just make this a little bit smaller. Okay, maybe let's style the button and the nav first before moving on. Let's just complete the sidebar. So there is my sidebar. I'm also going to grab the button and just give it a border solid 0.5 pixels and then make it kind of, well, I'm going to do white, but then I'm going to make it 0.5 opacity. So A is for opacity. Make sure to spell button correctly. We shouldn't really use RGB and hex, so we can swap that out at the end. And then let's also give it a background color of transparent. So we've given it a border, we've given it a background color. Let's round off the edges, border radius. And let's go with 5 pixels. And then padding, 10 pixels, margin, 10 pixels. Okay, so that's what I have done. So now it looks like that. Very much like the real thing. Now let's do the nav bar. So let's go back here and let's grab the nav element. And all I'm going to do is give it a border at the top. So I'm going to do border again, but this time just border top. And literally just copy this line really. Okay, but that's going to apply it just at the top. And let's also give it the same padding. So let's just copy this just to keep it consistent. Okay, so now it looks like this. Wonderful. This is looking great. Now, if I was to start adding elements into here, so into the history, so say we have a list item, doesn't really matter what we do for now. It's going to look like this. I don't really want the dots here, so I'm going to show you how to get rid of that, as well as give some padding to the whole unordered list. So let's grab the unordered list first. Okay, I'm just going to grab it by the element because we don't really have any other unordered lists in here, right? I mean, you could grab it by the history. I gave it a class name to make it more readable, so maybe let's just do that. So dot history. Dot is for class name, as hopefully you know. And let's apply the same padding and margin for consistency. I'm also just going to maybe make sure that it spaces out 100%. And now every list item that lives inside the element with the class of history, I'm just going to use list style type none. Okay, and that will remove that dot. Okay. Now I'm also going to pad it out. However, I just want to pad it out 15 pixels from the top and bottom and 0 from the left and right. So that is a shorthand for doing that. That will apply to the top and bottom, and this to the left and right. And I'm also wanting to give it a cursor of pointer because I'm going to want to be able to click on these, right? So I want it to be very obvious that we can click on them by changing the pointer like so. Right? Done. So we're now done with the sidebar. Maybe let's get rid of... Well, let's keep that for now. Okay, so let's move on to the main section now. Let's do it. Now, my main section, well, I'm just going to give this the H1 element of Anya GPT, like so. And then I'm also going to, I guess, make a feed. So we're going to use another unordered list. So luckily we gave that a class name because I am going to use another unordered list. So let's give this the class name of feed, because it's going to be for our feed. And we're going to also map out onto here some list items, which is essentially going to be each chat. Do we want to do this now? Maybe let's leave that for now. So we're going to map onto, of course, list items, but we'll leave that. Let's then make a div, and let's give this the class name of bottom section, and it's going to basically hold everything that needs to go in the bottom section. And what goes in a bottom section? Well, we're going to have an input, but I'm going to wrap it in an input container. So I'm going to make a div with a class name of input container, so that we can essentially position a little icon on top of the input. So let's put in our input. There we go. And then I'm also going to add a div and give this the ID of submit. Okay, so that is it. And again, I'm just going to use some text symbol. If you want to Google it, that is it. And you can get it from Unicode characters. So that is the URL to do it. Great. So now let's go back here. Okay, so we've got our input container, and under the input container, so make sure it's after this closing tag that's linked to here, I'm going to put a p element. Let's give this the class name of info, as I want to style this up a little bit smaller than a normal p element, and it's just going to have the text that I've stolen from the ChatGPT website. Okay, wonderful. So we've now finished with all of this. At the moment, it's under here because we have our sidebar here, and then our main is under here. We need these two to appear next to each other. So the parent of the sidebar and the main element is the div with the class name of app. So let's go back into here, and just right here, I'm going to use display flex, and that should make both of these appear next to each other like so. Great. Let's style up the main element a bit more next. So the main element, well, I want everything, I guess, to kind of be in the center, but also with space between. So once again, I'm going to initialize flexbox. So display flex. And once that is done, of course, everything will appear from left to right. We want it to appear from top to bottom. So what I can do is use flex direction column. And now I'm just going to justify content space between. Okay, so it looks like that. And now let's center the text as well as everything else actually. So we're going to use align item center, which again is part of flexbox. You can't use align items center, and you can't use this. In fact, you can't use any of these three without initializing flexbox. So just keep that in mind. And now let's also center the text. So once again, I'm going to do text align, this time center. And I believe that's all we need to do. So that is what it looks like. Next, I am just going to make this smaller and more transparent. So the p element with the class name of info. So all I'm going to do is grab the class name of info, and the color of this text is, well, it's not going to be white. Let's override that. So I'm going to do RGBA 255, 255, 255, 0.5 opacity is what I'm going to give it. Next, I'm just going to set the font size 11 pixels and pad it out just a little bit though by 10 pixels. So at the moment, it will look like this, okay? Just much more, I guess, realistic. Let's tackle the input next. So the input, well, of course, the input and the icon are children of the input container, and we want to do some positioning, which is why we're going to use position relative on this, and then position this based on the parent by giving it position absolute, and then some values for top and left, I believe. Let's have a look. Okay, so let's grab the input container, actually the other side. So top right or bottom right, top or bottom, it's up to us. So let's, yes, grab the input container. And like I said, we need to give it a position of relative to everything else. So essentially not much will change for that, but we need to do it in order to position the child. And one other thing that the input container lives in is the bottom section, which we're going to have to assign a width to. So the bottom section, let's just say we want this to have a width of 100%, just like so. Oops, there we go. I'm also going to use display flex on it and make sure that everything's stacked on top of each other. So I'm going to use flex direction column. And then let's also center everything. So justify content center and align items center. So everything's going to be centered from top to bottom and then left and right. So that should be good. So yes, it is. And now so here is I'm just going to show you exactly how big that bottom section is. It stretches. And then if we go into the bottom section, I need the input container to stretch too. So the input container, let's also give it a width of 100%. But then also stop it, so cap it if it gets to 650 pixels in width. Okay, great. So again, that won't look like much because now we need to stretch the input that lives inside of it. So now let's grab the actual input itself, and the width is going to be 100%. Now I'm also going to get rid of the border of this. Let's give it a background color, which is going to be RGBA. It's going to be white and it's going to be super opaque. So 0.05 I'm going to do. And let's also give it a padding at the top of 12 pixels and 15 pixels from the left and right. So this is applied to the top and bottom and this to the left and right, and round it off. So I'm going to do border radius 5 pixels. Okay. So one other thing that I should probably do is, well, let's have a look at what this looks like at the moment. So actually this looks good. I'm happy with that. I don't really want any focus on this, so that blue line. So what I'm also going to do is grab the input, focus, and I'm just going to do outline none. Okay, so that will get rid of that. And one last thing, I'm just also going to add some box shadow. I'm essentially going to overlay lots of box shadows on top of each other. The first color is going to be black. With 0.05 opacity, 0x axis, 54 pixels, y axis, 55 pixels blur, and then overlay it with another one. So in fact, I'm just going to copy this because I think we're going to keep the color the same, but just change the X and Y and blurs. So we'll make this -12 and change this to 30. Do it again. And this time 0, let's put 4 pixels and 6 pixels. And then again of 0, 12, 3 pixels, and a final one of 0, -3, and 5. So there we go, that's a lot. And we just need to change all of these to be commas instead because it's just one long box shadow. So the desired effect is now there. Let's position this next. So this time, what I'm going to do is grab the submit. Okay, so the div with the ID of submit, and I'm going to use position absolute. So at the moment that will appear here, but I want it to appear here, and I wanted to position it from the parent, from the bottom 15, and from the right 0. So let's go ahead and do that. Bottom 15 pixels and right 0. And I'm also going to change the cursor, so like we did before, to be pointed so that we know that we can click on this. And the end result is that. We could probably move it a little bit down. That does seem kind of high up, or maybe let's make the font size bigger for here. Maybe let's do that. So again, on the input, I'm just going to change the font size to be 20 pixels if we write in the input. And great, that is so much better. I think we're now ready to actually hook this up a little bit to the API. And for this, we're going to build a backend. So let's do it. So back in here, what I'm going to do is on the same level as the package JSON, I'm just going to create a new file. So let's go ahead and add a new file. I'm going to call it index, or let's call it server.js. You can call it whatever you want, really. So that is now our server. So that's our backend. Okay. And we're going to have to install a few things. So let's go ahead and do that first. So I'm going to install a package called cause express Node.js. And I think that's it. If you want a bit more information as to what these are, please do check out my full stack developer course where I go into this in a bunch more detail. Okay, or you can do your own research, just research those packages. Otherwise, let's carry on. So you will see those packages have an install here along with their version. So if something isn't working, make sure to revert back to these versions and install that version. Okay, if you are watching this in the future. So now that we've done that, let's write a script to start our backend. I'm going to call it start, but this time I'm going to write backend, and let's differentiate it by writing front end for this one. Front end. Maybe let's make that bigger so you can read it. And to start this, well, we're literally going to use the package that we just installed to listen out for constant changes on my backend. So I'm going to do Node.js, and then we're going to listen out for changes on server.js. Great. So now let's start our front end again. So I'm just going to stop it from running here and do npm run start front end and hit enter. Okay, so that will just rerun that, and I'm going to create another tab so I can run my backend. So keep both of those running. npm run start backend and hit enter. So now our backend is running. So let's actually define a port for it to run on first. So I'm going to minimize that. So we're done with the package JSON. Let's get up our server.js file. So we're going to run our backend on port 8000, and let's also just go ahead and require those packages that we literally just installed. So we're going to use express. We're also going to use cores, so require cores to get rid of any cause messages that we might come across. And now let's initialize it. So I'm going to essentially get express. We've got the package, we've saved it to express. I'm going to release everything by doing that and save it under app so we can use it in this project. So now I know I'm going to be working with JSON. So I'm just going to use app express JSON. That will allow us to work with JSON when we start sending stuff from the front end to the back end with our post requests. And I'm also going to do app use cores because I know that I'm going to run into some cause error messages. So that is the setup. Now I'm going to do app listen to listen out essentially on port. So let's actually just write a message. Your server is running on ports, and then whatever the port is. So port 8000, our const is 8000 that we're using here. Okay, we actually need to make this a callback function, pass through the port as the first parameter and this as the second parameter, and then console log this out. So console log this whole thing. Great. So now if we look in here, it says your server is running on port 8000. And if I make any changes, so if I just do console log hi, that will rerun. Okay. And same if I visit localhost 8000 here, that is our port and it's running. Of course, we haven't written any express routes. So that is why it says cannot get anything when we visit the home route right here. But let's carry on. So I'm just going to minimize that. Okay, so now it's time for us to get our API key. So all I'm going to do is head over to OpenAI and I'm going to go to developers API reference. Okay, of course you have to be signed in, so just make sure you are. I am currently signed in, and we are going to get our API key. So all you have to do is go here, view API keys, and I'm going to create a new secret key. So copy that. It's really that easy. There it is. If you got lost, just make sure to visit this URL when you are signed in, and you can create as many as you want. Of course, if yours gets taken or you think it's compromised, you can delete it as well. So keep that in mind. I just created one, and all I'm going to do is essentially, for now, I'm just going to put it here like so. So there we go. Right now it's in here, but we will be creating a .env file to keep it more safe. But, you know, I just want to get the basics done first. And now let's write our route. So if we post to the route, let's say if we go to, what should we do? Localhost 8000 / completions. This could be whatever you want. Essentially, all I'm saying is that if we visit / completions, then we will get something back here. Okay. And then the syntax for this, I have a request and a response. So put those in parentheses. This is actually going to be an async function because we're going to use the await keyword inside of here. But let's cross that when we get to it. We're going to do try and catch. So we're going to try something, and if it doesn't work, we're going to catch the errors. I'm just going to console error them out. So console error, the error. Okay, great. And what are we going to try? Well, we're going to use the fetch keyword. Make sure you are on the latest version of Node in order to be able to use the fetch API keyword on the backend. So just keep that in mind as well. So all I'm going to do is use the fetch keyword, and we're going to fetch to the completions API. So once again, let's go back here. Let's go to the documentation, and we're going to use the chat completions API from OpenAI. So the model we're going to use is, I don't have access to GPT-4 yet, so I'm going to use GPT 3.5 Turbo. So let's go here, and if we go into chat, create chat completion, not completion, okay, chat completions, this is the URL that we're going to need, okay? So I'm just going to make that smaller. Here we go. It's a post request to this URL. So I'm just going to grab that and paste it in like so. Next, we're going to have to pass through some options, like what kind of request is going to be, so what method, some headers with our API key, as well as actually what body we want to use and the message we want to send over. So I'm going to define that here, const options. It's going to be a whole object. And like I said, it's going to take a method. There's going to be a post method as we discussed. And next, we're going to pass through some headers. So the headers that it's going to take, well, we need to pass through some authorization. So make sure to spell this like so, authorization. And the authorization is just going to be, well, a string with our const. So that's why I put backtick, so we can use that code in here. We have to put bearer and then that, and then we're just going to put some curly braces so that we can pass through the API key. So that's how you'd put in variables. You'd use the $ and the curly braces. Okay, next we're also going to have to pass through the content type. So content type, and then we're going to put application JSON, as we're going to be working with JSON. And now we can define the request body. So we're going to have to pass this through JSON stringify, okay? And it's going to be an object that we're going to send through, and we're going to JSONify it thanks to JSON stringify. The model we're going to be working with, as I said, I don't have access to ChatGPT-4, but if you do, please go ahead and use that because the results will be better. I'm going to use this model right here, and the messages we're going to pass through are going to be, so the role is going to be user, And then content. Well, the content for now, let's just put how are you? Okay, and we'll replace that. We're just going to check this works. And I don't want to go over 20 tokens. I'm going to limit my tokens. So I can do max tokens 100. Okay, that will just mean basically every string text prompt is tokenized. If you want to check how many tokens your string is going to use, you can check it before using this on the OpenAI documentation. But I think just, put a max in here just so you don't go over and use up all your free credits and whatever. So there we go. One thing that I will say is that we can't pass over JSON from the front end to the back end unless you have this, right? So if you're having any issues when it comes to that, make sure you have this. That's very important. Okay, great. So those are all my options that we're going to pass through with this URL. Like I said, this fetch API is an async method, which is why we're going to have to await it. So we're literally going to wait for something to come back, and we're going to save it under response. And because we're using the await keyword in here, this whole function needs to be an async function. Again, check out my full stack developer course if you want to learn more about this in more detail. So now once we get the response, we're going to wait for it, and then we get it back. I'm going to get its JSON, but JSON is another async method, so we're going to have to await this too. We're going to await it, and once we get it back, we're going to save it as data. Great. And let's just send this over to localhost 8004/completions by passing it through rest send. So now let's check it out. So first off, after you've done this, let's hook this up to the front end. And I'm going to do so with an on click. So on here, if we click this div, I want something to happen. And I just want to get message. Okay, that's all I'm going to do. In fact, maybe let's do messages as it could be plural. And let's define it up here. So right under here, we're going to define get messages. So const get messages. It's going to be an async function because we're going to use the fetch keyword in here too. And once again, we're going to use try and catch. So try, and we're going to catch any errors. And what are we going to do this time? Well, first off, we're just going to console error any errors. And in here, once again, we're going to use the fetch keyword, so await fetch. We're going to pass in the URL. This time, though, we're going to get it from our backend. So right here, that's what we're going to get it from. So paste that in like so. And again, we're going to have some options because we're going to have to pass through some data, right? So exactly what we're writing into the input. So let's define our options again. Again, the method is going to be a post method. The body this time is, I'm just going to actually pass through a message, and it's going to have a value. But at the moment, well, yeah, we can pass it through. Let's just put hello, how are you? So we're hard coding it, and we're going to have to wrap this through JSON stringify again. So JSON stringify, and then we're going to get that whole object and pass it through. Okay, great. And I'm just going to add headers as we are working with JSON. So I'm going to put content type application JSON. Okay, wonderful. So once again, we're going to wait for the response. And once we get the response, we're going to get its JSON, and let's save it as data, just like so. And then for now, I'm just going to console log the data. So let's test it out. So at the moment, we're just hard coding hello you. That will be passed on to the server, but we're not doing much with it because we're just going to send how are you from here anyway. So let's just try this out. So here, if I click on here, I don't need to put anything in. We're just going to wait. The promise is pending. Why is that? That's because we didn't await. So we need to wait for that to come back. That's why we got a promise there. Let's try again. And great. So we get back this whole object. Okay, everything is working. And if we look in the object and we look under choices and we look under the first item in the array, we get a message from the assistant saying, I'm an AI language model, so I don't have feelings like humans do, but I'm functioning properly and ready to assist. So we're getting back that message. Next thing we want to do is actually show that message in here. And instead of hard coding, how are you? We want to actually get the input, right? So let's do it. Well, first off, I'm just going to save that response, so the whole message to state. And for that, we need use state from React. So I'm going to import use state, and while we're at it, use effect, as I know I will need that from React. So now if I want to save that message, I can go const message, set message, use state, and let's start off with it being null. And so null, at the moment we get null, go, we assign the value of null to message. And if you want to change the value of message, we use set message to do it. So I do want to change the value. So I'm just going to use set message. And what I'm going to do is go into the data, get the choices. So just like we did before, go into that array, get the first item and get the message, right? So once again, here's my whole object. So that's technically data. You go into choices, get the first item of that array. So 0, right? 0. And then we get the message. So the message will actually be an object that has the content and the role. Okay, I want to save both. So let's carry on. So we don't need to console log this out anymore. The message with the role and the content is being saved under the const message. So it's not a string, it's an object. Okay, so what do we say we want to do next? Right, we want to hook up the input. So let's save the value up here too. Value, set value, use state, null, and we're going to override the value if we interact with the input. So let's find that input. Here we go. We're going to display the value. So whatever the value is right now, we're just going to assign to the input. At the moment, it's null, of course. But on change of this input, well, I'm just going to pass through the event. I'm going to set value to whatever target value is of that input, right? So now up here, if I console log value, just anywhere, just above the return, and I type something, let's check it up our console log. See, we're technically console logging value. We're console logging at app line 27. And it will change. So that is how we are changing the value constant. Okay, and next let's actually, whatever state it's at, I want to send it over. So currently I would send over this. Let's hook that up. So what I would do, this is super simple. All I would do is get rid of this string and put the value instead. Okay. And now to pass it to our backend, where we're passing it through with the body, we need this to be here in order for this to work. So don't forget that. And that just means that instead of having this here, I can get the request body message and pass that through like so. And that will now be sent over to OpenAI. Okay. So again, if this doesn't make sense, check out my full stack developer course. I don't want to keep banging on about it, but you know, there's a lot of stuff we're doing here that for a beginner will be way too much. So do check it out. So now the one last thing I'm going to do, well, I'm just going to console log the message that we get back. So that's saved under message and try it out. So let's do what is 2 plus 2, send that. And great, we get 4, and it's from the assistant, from the AI assistant. So let's now use this in order to create a chat response, okay, as a list item. So let's do it. So let's go back in here. And what I'm going to do is actually save all the previous chats and you set previous chats in order to change that. And I'm going to start off with this being an empty array this time. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to actually get this whole message. So whatever's coming back here right now, it comes back with the role and content. And I'm also just going to assign a title so that I can essentially say that, okay, this chat has this title. I'm going to lump it together. However, this chat is a new chat. I'm going to give it a new title. And it's just going to be the first prompt that we give our chat. So let's do it. Let's do this maybe in a use effect. Okay. So just like so. And I'm going to say that anytime the message changes, so whatever we get back from the OpenAPI, I want this to run. I'm also going to save the current title. So current title, set current title, use state, and start off with being an empty array as well. So I'm also actually going to change this if the current title changes. So whatever the prompt for the chat, whatever the start of the chat changes, then we run this again. So let's just console log the current title, the value, so the input value, and the message that comes back to us. Okay, just so we can see a little bit more of what is going on. Great, that needs a comment there. So what do I want to do? Well, if there's currently no current title, right? So if there's no new title, we don't have a chat. However, we do have a value in our input and we do have a message that has come back to us, where then I want to set the current title to be whatever the value is, right? So hopefully that makes sense. And once we save it, we can add it to the history. However, if there is a current title already that exists and the value exists in an input and we get the message back, so we're on the chat currently, we're still chatting away, we just want to set previous chats and we're going to essentially get whatever's in that array already, right? And this is how you would update an array using use state. I would open up the array, I would get the previous chats and spill them out, but then I'd also add, I'm going to add an object. I'm actually going to add two objects. So just like so. Maybe I'll put this on a new row so it's more readable for you. There's one object. And here is another object. It's going to have the title. And the title is going to be the current title. So whatever the first prompt was, the role is going to be the user. So essentially us, and the content is going to be the value. So I'm using kind of what OpenAI gave me in terms of structure for the object, but I've added my own title so we can save it to state. And then I'm literally just going to get what ChatGPT gave back to me. So role, I'm going to go into the message and get the role. And I'm going to get the content and get the message content. Okay, and I'm also just going to give this the title of the current title. So let's just talk this through. So every time we are saving previous chat, so a new chat, I'm saving whatever we ask the AI, and we're assigning the role as us, the user. And I'm just going to save the current title to make sure that all the chats are lumped by the first prompt. And I'm also sending over the other object, which is the response from the AI, which we've saved under the const message, right? That was an object that had a role and content. And I'm literally just getting the role from that object. I'm getting content from that object and assigning it to role and content for my previous chats state. I'm going to show you what this looks like. Okay, so there we go. We have a few more things to do, and that is actually set the history by the current titles. So let's go ahead and do that here. So here's my section of main. And actually, let's just show this if there's no current title, then we show this. However, if there's a current title, then we get rid of that. And here we're going to map out onto list items. However, maybe let's just see what this looks like at the moment. I'm just going to console log out previous chats. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So let's go back here. I'm just going to, let's start a new chat. What is 5 plus 5? Let's ask it. Okay, so that is essentially, these are my previous chats. We've created an object that has the content of what we asked it as the user. There we go. The title is an empty array. That is strange. We need to essentially change that current title. And then our second object, the content is 10 because that's the answer that we got back from the AI, and the role of the AI is a system. So why is title saving as an empty array? That is because the current title, we did set this to be an empty array. This should actually be null because we're just going to save a text prompt. And where do we set the current title? Well, essentially this should have done it for me because we're listening out for if current title changes. And if there is no current title, which technically there is not, okay, because before it was an array that didn't run. Let's try that again. So what is 5 plus 5? Let's click on that. Okay, and great. Now our title gets populated with the prompt itself, and both of them have that prompt, right? And now because current title exists, we will miss this because current title does exist, and we'll just keep adding to the chat, right? So let's ask another question. Are you sure? Okay, now there's 4 because I asked it another question. So there's me asking, are you sure as the user? The title is still the same, the first initial prompt, and then we're getting the response, okay, from the assistant. So great. So this is good. However, what if I want to change it? I want a new chat. So if I click here, I essentially want to clear this title. So let's do it. So I'm going to make a handle click function that I'm going to attach, or maybe let's call it something else. So on the button on click, I'm going to create new chat. So let's define it. So up here, const create new chat. I'm going to set message. I'm just going to clear everything. Set message. So whatever the message is from the AI, I'm going to set that to null. I'm going to set the value of the input to an empty string. So we're clearing that. And I'm going to set the current title to be null too. So I'm essentially completely clearing it so we can start fresh. Okay. So shall we have a go at this? Let's try it out. What is 1 plus 1? Let's send that over. Okay, so we get that there. The title is assigned, but if I start a new chat and go, how are you? And send that over. Okay, the title has changed. So great. So now if we ask more questions, the title of that should be still attached to, how are you? And it is. So great, now I'm going to get the unique title. So we're going to get everything and we're going to filter by the unique title and show it in the history as well as show the chat up here. So all I'm going to do is get the previous chats and I'm going to use filter. And I'm going to look at each previous chat individual. You can call this whatever you want. It's essentially every item in my array. And I'm going to literally just look at the previous chat object's title. And if it equals the current title that we are currently on, well, then we know that we're on the current chat. So let's save these filtered items as current chat objects. So any object that has the title that is the same will be lumped into current chats. And this just means I can then get current chats with the feed, okay, and map out each, let's call it maybe a chat message. We're going to have to use an index as we are mapping. So let's put that index here, like so. And then I'm just going to map onto a list item. We, of course, need to give it a key. So I'm just going to use the index for that, for this demo. And then I'm just going to essentially, I'm trying to spell key correctly, and put that there. Put in two things into my list item element. I'm going to put in two p tags. This one's going to show you who sent the message. So role, either it's the user or the AI assistant. And here I'm just going to show the content of that message. I'm going to go chat message. Great. And let's just give this the class name of role. So it's really obvious. Okay. And we can pick it out later. So this is looking good to me. Let's just check that that current chat exists first before mapping anything onto here. And while we are here, I'm also just going to get all the unique titles. So I'm going to filter, I'm going to get all the messages and just get the unique titles. Because as we saw, there's some titles that have like numerous, right? We just want essentially to filter them all out and just return this title and put them in an array for us. So I'm going to show you the code to do that. Well, this time we're actually going to get the previous chats and we're going to map. I'm going to get the previous chat individual and we're just going to get the previous chat title. And now I can pass it through. So all of this, I'm going to pass that through into a new set and make an array from it. So array from, just like so, and this will give me the unique title. So that piece of code is super useful if you want to get unique items from an object. So if I console log this out now, unique titles on line 61, you will see I've just got those unique titles and put them in an array. Great, because now I can map them on into the history. So let's get those unique titles. And instead of having blur, I'm going to get the unique titles. And if they exist, I'm going to map each unique title. Let's also maybe get the index. So put that in parentheses like so. And I'm just going to get that unique title and pass it through here as code like so. So wonderful. I believe that should be it. We just need to give this a key. And it should now look like this. So it doesn't look great at the moment. We still need to style stuff up. But now let's actually maybe add an on click so that if we select a chat, then we essentially pass through that chat that we click on as the current title, right? Because we want to change the current title to the other chat. So I'm going to define a function for this. Const handle click. And if we click on any one of those, so handle click is assigned to the list item in history. So in here, so we'll do it on here on click. We're going to call the function handle click. And we just want to click on it. So if we click on the first unique title, I'm just going to pass through the unique title that we clicked on. So now we need to make this a callback function, as we just call that again. So we're going to pass it through into here, that unique title, and we're just going to set current title to be whatever title we clicked on, right? So hopefully that makes sense. It will do in a bit. So that's what we're going to do. And we're also just going to set message to null and set value to null. Okay, so we're just starting fresh. Great, so let's just test it out. What is 4 plus 4? Send. So that should now get assigned to here. Great, and we can click on it. And why is my content not showing up? Let's have a look. Let's go down here. Chat message, this should be content, right? Because that's what we saved it as here, role and content, and that's what we're mapping out. So now if we look in here, there we go. User, what is 4 plus 4? Assistant is 8. And I obviously pressed it twice because I'm getting it twice. So let's just try it again. What is 4 plus 4? Send. Great. Are you sure? Question mark. Okay, and that's my assistant's answer. And then I'm just going to start a new chat. And this time, how are you? Okay, so that's my question and that's the assistant's answer. But if I want to swap back and carry on this conversation, you are great, then I can. And it will be assigned to here. It does not get added to here. So great, this is looking so good. And if I clear it, we just get Anya GPT. This is wonderful. A few more styling things that just style up these messages next. So all I'm going to do is style up essentially this list item here. So let's do it. So down here, I'm going to first style up the feed. I'm just going to give it a scroll. So I'm going to go over full scroll so we can scroll through the messages if we get loads. I'm going to make sure that the width is 100%. And I'm also going to just give it a padding of 0. So it's really squashed up to the edges. Next, any list item that lives inside my feed. So just like that. I'm going to use display flex. So I'm initializing flexbox so they appear next to each other rather than stacked. And the background color, I'm just going to go with 444654. The width, I want it to be 100%. And I'm going to give it some padding of 20 pixels. And I'm going to space out each list item top and bottom by 20 pixels and 0 from the left and right. Okay, so at the moment it looks like this. This is looking good. Let's just align the text a little bit better. So again, I'm just going to say that any P element that lives inside of my feed is going to have the color of RGBA, so a bit more transparent. I'm going to go with white, 0.8 opacity. I'm going to get the font size of 14 pixels, and I'm going to text a line left. And if that P element also happens to have the class of role, I'm just going to assign it a min width of 100 pixels. So there we go. This is looking so good right now. You can of course add images in here instead of just use an assistant like the actual app does, but I think this is looking fantastic. There are a few things you can do to clear this up. For example, I do use RGB and hex colors in here, so please go ahead and change that. But overall, now you know how to use the OpenAI API and you know how to make this cool ChatGPT clone that has a history that you can kind of move back and forth to and add to the history and create new chats with as well. Finally, we're just going to hide this. So I'm just going to stop this from running and import a package called .env. So just like that. And we're just going to create a new file. So new file on the same level as the server.js. So env. Just like that. And we're going to define our API key. So instead of having it here, I'm just going to take it. You don't have to put it as a string that is implied. Just paste it in. And now that means that I can just use process env API key. And of course, we need to require that package. So require.env config. And just start this up again. Okay, so just do that. That should now be picked up from this .env file. Okay, so that you don't upload this .env file onto GitHub. Great. So great. I hope you have had fun. Please take this to the next level. Add new features. It's yours.